Currently working on Blocks in the East. I'm the first one turn in to the Case Blue scenario. I used the historical setup that the designer provided on his website for the game, rather than doing the open setup, which is what the scenario book actually has, where you just have a certain number of points that you allocate to the number of blocks that you set up. So you can have, a lot of full strength blocks or a lot of under strength blocks. In this case, the start of the Case Blue scenario historically had a lot of weak Russian units along the line across the southern portion of southern Russia there. As you can see, after the first turn, the Germans have pretty much bulldozed right through that. They've opened up a hole in the line over here, and over here along this section is kind of all that's left of that initial Russian line. Germans have also taken Crimea, but they have not yet. They've taken the city of Kerch here, but have not yet moved across the strait. So the Soviets will try and hold that for as long as they can. The Germans did take Rostov on the first turn. There wasn't much the Soviets could do to prevent that. Naturally, that's going to cause a lot of problems for these guys down here, as the Germans can swing around, cut off supply to those guys at the Kerch Strait. Up in the north, things were likewise fairly disastrous. The portion of the Soviet line, this is Moscow right here. So this was fairly dense with Soviet troops, and still is largely. What I ended up doing was actually pulling them back, pulling these weak frontline troops back to stack up with some stronger interior units, but still doing defense in depth in front of Moscow. The Germans aren't likely to push too hard towards Moscow, as they have a really thin line here, really, and not much to garrison cities that they end up capturing. This empty space here was where a large pocket of Soviet infantry was. The scenario starts with the Germans advanced along kind of like pincers here, and equally with a certain amount of danger of themselves having gotten cut off. But they were able to exploit the weakness of the Soviet pocket, which was this hex here, which the Germans were able to cut off. Pocketing this group, the Soviets were unable to break through and reestablish contact with the pocket there. So by the end of the Soviet turn, all these guys out of supply had to surrender. So that was 6 blocks there that the Soviets lost. So kind of a disastrous first turn for the Soviets, which was not... I don't know enough historically about the Case Blue offensive. I know it was initially very successful, and then, much like Barbarossa, ended up bogging down once the Germans got to Stalingrad and essentially started their troops. And Stalingrad here is way back here on the map. I believe the German troops actually got, down into the Caucasus, and then these oil fields, and then oil fields over here along the coast were their goal. And I believe they got to the Maikop oil fields down here, and sort of got held up in the mountains here, and eventually Soviet counterattacks along this long exposed front that the Germans had leading out to Stalingrad eventually collapsed under repeated Soviet counterattacks. So I have to say, though, after this first turn, I'm not sure what the Soviets are going to do to create those counterattacks. I need to build a lot more units, and the production decisions were fairly difficult for the Soviets because you want to beef up some of the armor units that you have there, because the armor units are important for your mobility and counterattacking capability. But with the advanced production rules, you still have to spend a lot of yellow production points. Little yellow cubes you can see in the pile over there. You still have to spend a lot of that on armor. You have to spend an equal amount of yellow production points on armor as you do red. Same thing with replacing air units. And the Soviets have so many units that are that start with one strength point. Almost all of their frontline units that were directly in contact with, not so much up here, but that were directly in contact with German units, were strength point 1, which is just not going to last very long against concentrated German attacks with units that are a lot stronger than that. So the question was, do I bring on some new units? Do I beef up some of the more expensive air and armor units? Or do I just pile everything into trying to raise as many 1 strength point infantry units as I can? What I ended up doing was kind of a mix of both, and the results were not particularly encouraging. I did strengthen a number of the armor units along the southern front to give them some kind of fast response capability, and then a couple more of the infantry units in here I beefed up, but I just ultimately feel like it's going to be too little to stop the next turn of Germans just continuing to ravage that southern Soviet front. I am sticking with sort of the historical plan for the Germans, which is to put all of my force into the southern push down here, which you can see there's a lot of units there. Whereas up north, it's more of a holding action. I did push offensively to get that pocket taken out because it was too good of an opportunity to pass up. If I could have made it work, which I did. I'm kind of ignoring Leningrad and Oranienburg almost entirely. We just really don't have the force to successfully prosecute that siege with what the Soviets have in that city. I'm content right now to keep it bottled up. It does have this special, which you can't really see here because the blocks are in the way, but you can see that road of life there across Lake Ladoga. That was the historic supply line for Leningrad during the siege, and it goes to the city here, which I don't remember the name of the city offhand. Volkhov. As long as the Soviets hold Volkhov, they can keep the road of life open. So the question is, will I try with the Germans to take Volkhov? And I don't know. I'm still kind of undecided about that. Like I said, mainly focusing on just a holding action up here with the Finns and the Germans, while the bulk of the German offensive effort goes into the broad southern front here. So hoping that I'm doing the production rules right. You can see all of the saved PP here for the Germans. Most of that came from surrendered Soviet units, which were mostly, actually entirely infantry. There may have been some air units in there too, but I know I saved over, and I held over 3 yellow German production points in order to hold over 3 German oil barrels here. because anytime you want to save non-yellow cubes or non-yellow resources, you have to pair a yellow resource with it. So I don't remember if I saved these from the previous turn or not. These also would have needed 3 more. I think these may have actually been Soviet fighters that were destroyed in combat. So I think I'm doing this right. I'm assuming that when you capture production, or when you surrender units, or in this case, surrendering means destroyed in the context of the game. So when you destroy units in combat, they're considered surrendered, and you collect production points for them. And I'm assuming that they go here. I don't think the manual really explained where you store those points. So I just added it to the saved production points box for the Germans, so they can spend these points on their production next turn. So they're going to have a lot of extra points to add to their production for shoring up their units on the board, or possibly building some more units. And they don't have a lot more to build. Most of what they can bring to bear is on the board, whereas you can see conversely, the Soviets have a lot of dead units that are back on the order of battle. Now they also have a lot of units down there that will be coming in later, mostly tanks. So in upcoming turns, a lot of that stuff will be made available. There's a lot of tanks there that they can build also, but the question is, will they be able to afford that production, or will they just have to continually spend points trying to shore up what they have on the map so they don't get completely overrun? I guess we shall find out. This is a 6-turn, believe. Let me double check the scenario. I believe it's 6 turns. 7 turns, June through November 1942. So we will see how it goes in upcoming turns.